Baghdad was once bigger, richer, and smarter than any city on earth. Let that sink in. For centuries, this wasn't just a city, it was the center of the world. Imagine a map, not with London or New York at its heart, but Baghdad. From here, trade routes spread like a spider's web, connecting China to Spain, Africa to Russia. Caravans carrying silks, spices, and precious metals flowed into its gates, while ships sailed the Tigris River, their masts thick as a forest. At its peak in the 9th century, Baghdad was home to nearly 1 million people. To put that in perspective, Paris was a town of maybe 20,000. London was even smaller. Baghdad wasn't just a city. It was a sprawling, global metropolis, a beacon of civilization in a world still largely cloaked in what we call the Dark Ages. What made it so special? Let's start with its design. The original city, founded by the Caliph Al-Mansur, was a perfect circle, a masterpiece of urban planning called the Round City. It was a statement of power and order. From massive gates, named after the destinations they pointed to, pierced its double brick walls. At the absolute center stood the Caliph's magnificent palace with its famous green dome, and next to it, the Grand Mosque. This was the nerve center of the vast Abbasid Empire. But the real life of Baghdad spilled out beyond these official walls. It was a labyrinth of winding streets, bustling with energy. Sophisticated canal systems, drawing water from the Tigris and Euphrates, not only irrigated lush gardens, but also served as highways for transporting goods. Imagine the sensory overload, the constant clamor of merchants hawking their wares in the souk, the smell of exotic spices, and roasting lamb mingling with the scent of perfumes and, let's be honest, open sewers. You'd feel the press of the crowd, 1,000 different conversations in a dozen languages happening all at once. This wasn't a quiet, orderly place, it was a vibrant, chaotic, living organism. So, who were these nearly 1 million people? Baghdad was a true melting pot. Arabs, of course, but also Persians, who brought their rich administrative and cultural traditions. Turks came as soldiers and rose to powerful positions. They were Africans, brought as laborers, soldiers, or slaves, and traders from as far as India and Scandinavia. It was a city of incredible diversity, not just of ethnicity but of faith. While Islam was the state religion, huge communities of Christians and Jews thrived. They had their own neighborhoods, their own places of worship, and their own laws. They were doctors, bankers, and scholars, integral to the city's success. Of course, society was sharply divided. There was the Caliph and his court, a world of unimaginable luxury. Below them were government officials, military leaders, wealthy merchants, and scholars. But the vast majority of people were artisans, shopkeepers, and laborers. And yes, slavery was a fact of life. Slaves worked in homes, on farms, and in the military. Yet, what was remarkable about Baghdad was the potential for social mobility. A brilliant mind, regardless of their background, could find patronage and rise to prominence. A clever merchant could amass a fortune. It was a city of opportunity. But how did the average person actually make a living? Forget what you've heard about everyone sitting around the House of Wisdom translating Greek philosophy all day. That was a highly elite institution, a think tank for the 1%. For the 99%, life was about work. The city's economy buzzed with countless professions. In the markets, you'd find craftsmen of every kind, metalworkers hammering intricate patterns into brass, weavers creating beautiful textiles, and leather workers tooling saddles. Potters, glassblowers, and carpenters had their own quarters. Then there were the service providers. Scribes sat in public squares, their stalls busy with people who needed letters written or documents copied. Water carriers, or sakas, were essential, hauling water from the river to homes. Food stalls were everywhere, selling everything from simple bread to elaborate kebabs. The Tigris River was a workplace for thousands of fishermen and boatmen who ferried people and goods across its waters. This was a complex, specialized economy. Your life was defined by your trade. your guild, and the small neighborhood community where you lived and worked. And what was that life like at home? It really depended on how much money you had. The wealthy dined on extravagant dishes, tender lamb stewed with apricots and almonds, rice pilaf scented with saffron, and delicate pastries sweetened with honey. For the poor, the diet was much simpler: flatbread, dates, yogurt, and maybe some vegetables or a bit of fish. Homes, however, shared some common features designed for the hot climate. Most were built from mud brick around a central, open-air courtyard. This courtyard was the heart of the home, providing light, air, and a private space for the family away from the crowded streets. Rooms opened onto this courtyard, and during the scorching summer months, people might even sleep on the flat rooftops to catch a cool breeze. Privacy was paramount. Windows facing the street were small and high up, and the entrance to a house was often designed as a bent axis, so no one could see directly into the courtyard from the door. As for clothing, think practical. Most men wore a simple, long tunic, often made of cotton or wool, with a turban or cap to protect them from the sun. Women also wore long tunics, but in public, they would be covered by an outer wrap, with their faces veiled. Bright colors and fine fabrics like silk were reserved for the rich. For the average Baghdadi, clothing was simple, loose-fitting, and functional. Religion wasn't just something you did on a Friday. It was woven into the fabric of daily existence. The call to prayer echoed from hundreds of minarets 5 times a day, setting the rhythm of life. The mosque wasn't just for prayer. It was the community center. It was where you'd hear news, where children were taught to read the Quran, where neighbors would gather and chat. For legal matters, people went to a qadi, a judge who presided over a Sharia court. These courts handled everything from business disputes and inheritance to marriage and divorce. Their rulings were based on Islamic law and were meant to be swift and accessible. But what about the non-Muslims? Christians and Jews were considered people of the book and were granted dhimmi status. This meant they paid a special tax, the jizya, in exchange for which their communities were protected and allowed to govern their own internal affairs, like marriage and inheritance, according to their own religious laws. While they weren't equal in status to Muslims, it was a level of structured tolerance that was rare in the medieval world. But we can't romanticize it. Life in medieval Baghdad was also incredibly tough. This was a city built of brick and wood, and fires were a constant, terrifying threat that could wipe out entire neighborhoods in hours. And with 1 million people crammed together without modern sanitation, disease was rampant. Dysentery, typhoid, and cholera were common killers. Every few decades, a major plague would sweep through, killing tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands. The streets were filled with refuse and waste, and the canals could become clogged and stagnant. Crime was also a reality. While the city had a police force, the shurta, the dark, winding alleyways could be dangerous places at night. Gangs and thieves were a part of the urban landscape. Life expectancy was low. If you survived childhood, you might live into your 40s or 50s, but life was precarious. For all its glory, Baghdad was a city that faced the harsh, unforgiving realities of the pre-modern world. The Golden Age, like all golden ages, couldn't last forever. By the 10th and 11th centuries, the cracks were beginning to show. The immense cost of the court and army began to drain the treasury. Political power struggles erupted between different factions at court: Arabs, Persians, and the increasingly powerful Turkish military commanders who began to act as kingmakers. The city was rocked by civil unrest and sometimes outright civil war. Religious tensions, once manageable, began to flare up. From outside, the vast Abbasid Empire was fracturing, with provinces breaking away to form their own dynasties. And far to the east, a new storm was gathering on the steppes of Central Asia. A people who would unite under a leader named Genghis Khan were on the move. The Mongols were coming, and though Baghdad didn't know it yet, its world was about to be shattered. So, Baghdad wasn't a fairy tale from the Arabian Nights. It was a real city, populated by real people, with all the complexity, brilliance, and brutality that entails. It was a powerhouse of innovation and a hub of human connection, but it was also a place of disease, inequality, and danger. Its story is a powerful reminder of how civilizations rise and fall. In many ways, its journey mirrors that of other great medieval Islamic centers, like Cairo, which also became a beacon of culture and commerce after Baghdad's decline. By looking at these real, messy, magnificent cities, we get a much truer picture of our shared human past. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this journey back in time, be sure to like and subscribe for more.